Hi there. Welcome to the Weekend Extra. I'm Shana Kim here with Pastor Jeff Bogue. We are just discussing the sermon title of Regardless of Circumstances. So tonight, Jeff, you said, or you took us through a discussion about the prayer that Jesus prayed for us.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, John 17, Jesus is praying for the disciples, and then he says, and all those who hear your message or are brought to me by your message. So us, specifically the church, Christ followers. And that prayer is a fantastic prayer, obviously, and fascinating. And I told everybody we could talk about this for 5 months.
Right.
There's just so much in there. So I just picked a sliver of it, and that's important. I encourage you guys to just read John 17, and it'll blow your mind a little bit. But I picked this little sliver of it, and it's the sliver of John 17 where Jesus was saying, Father, I've taught them your word. They are not of this world any more than I am of this world. And then he says, I am not asking you to remove them from the world. I'm asking you to protect them from the evil one, and I'm sending them into the world just as you have sent me into the world. And so we were talking about this idea that in the middle of crisis, Christ followers are not defined by crisis, we're defined by Christ. So it really doesn't matter what's happening in our life. Like what we live for, what we value, what we believe is kind of locked in place. And we would interpret everything around us through that system, right?
That's just really hard to see sometimes.
Which is really hard to see sometimes because we live in the world. So this was kind of like I just called it a poor man's definition, but I just said the world are values, systems, beliefs, actions, and thoughts that are not defined by Christ. So everything around us, right, our norms, our culture, our governmental systems, our philosophies, our opinions, entertainment, like all of it's what the Bible would call worldly.
Right.
And that's not so much an accusation all the time. It's more of like a definition.
Okay.
And when people are of the world, their values or beliefs or thoughts or actions are not defined and directed by Christ. They're defined and directed by whatever social norm is around them at the moment. Well, as a Christ follower, regardless of circumstances, none of that defines me. I'm defined and directed by Christ. And Jesus says, that's why people hate you, because you don't fit in.
Right.
And you're not going to. They hated me, they're going to hate you. So he kind of starts that section of the prayer saying all that, praying all that.
Right.
And then he says, I'm not asking you to remove them. I'm asking you to protect them. And what he's asking the Father to protect us from is the temptation for us to love the world, right? The lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, the pride of life. And then he prays that, and then he says, I'm going to sanctify them. The word sanctify means to be set apart for a particular use. So I'm going to sanctify them through your word. Your word is truth. Through truth, your word is truth. And then I am sending them into the world as you are sending me. So it was this whole conversation about how God isn't trying to shield us from the world. He's not trying to get us to join the convent or to become Amish, kind of a thing.
Right.
He's sending us into a world that is not to define us. And
into a world that's full of crisis.
That's full of crisis.
Right. Yeah.
And what happens is when that world is in crisis, everything they value is being stripped away from them because they're driven by the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. So lust of the eyes is everything from like sexual immorality to like greed, like
Right.
I want your car, right? Lust of the flesh is like everything from sexual immorality to like being addicted to food or drugs or whatever.
The Botox.
To Botox. Yeah, seriously. To youth,
Being
all those
vain.
kind of things.
Yeah.
Being vain. And then the pride of life is Botox and power and position and wealth and how people look at me and all those kind of things. So what happens in crisis, all that is stripped away.
Okay.
Right? I lose my health, I lose my money, I lose my job,
Right.
kind of a thing. Well, for people of the world, that's their identity, their values, their beliefs, and their thoughts. For a Christ follower, you strip all that away, and we're still who we are.
Yeah.
And when we do that, when that happens in a crisis, the world will ask the Christ follower, can you tell me the reason for the hope that's within you? Because I'm so afraid to die or to be poor or to retire or to get old or whatever.
Right.
What's your deal? And that's when, when people ask the question, Peter says, when they ask, you tell them. And we're hope and we're light. So Jesus says, I've actually sent you into that dark place to illuminate it. Like, that's the deal. That's what the Father did with me. Right. He sent me to that dark place to illuminate it. And by the way, they're going to hate you. It's not going to be comfortable. It's all temporary. But don't be sucked into it, but you're going to be in it, and that's where you're supposed to be.
Which can be incredibly humbling, right? When you're going through any kind of crisis, or maybe even not going through a crisis, but just so absorbed in our culture, it's just crazy hard to sometimes, I don't know, not really trust that that we are supposed to be centered on him and not that crisis, that he's got us, that we can put our hope in him, and remember sometimes where that hope comes from, or, that we are going to be either lifted up or carried through, or, whatever that may be, that we can trust that he's got us.
Yeah, I think you're dead on, Shana. Like, it's in the moment. See, we want to reach for what everybody else reaches for. And what sets us apart is not that we're bickering. It's not that we're accusing. It's not that, what sets us apart is we don't reach for that.
Right.
Or we're not motivated by it, And so and Jesus, I asked a question in the conversation this weekend. I said, I had everybody stop for a second. I said, let's think about why did the Romans hate Jesus? Jesus never did anything to them.
Right.
Why did they hate him? Why did the Jews hate Jesus? He didn't do anything to the ancient Jewish people. Why they hate him? Well, they hated him because they couldn't control him. Because what was so meaningful to them didn't mean anything to him.
Right.
And so it just drove him nuts. He disrupted the system, not because he protested or ran for office. He disrupted the system because he wouldn't participate in it.
Right.
And that's why, even today, totalitarian governments, as an example, will come after the church. And we see this in our own culture right now. People who want change, or they're totalitarian, they're controlling, they will attack Christians. They won't attack other religious groups. They'll attack Christians. Why? Because we don't value what they value.
Right.
And they're like, well, you're against us. We're like, we're not against you. We just aren't motivated the way. We love you. We love our enemies.
Right.
But nothing you can, it's like, I'll take your money. Okay. I'll take your freedom. All right. I'll take your life. Okay. I mean, I don't care. There's nothing you can do to control me because I'm not of the world. I'm born again. So we're born into sin, which is the world. When we're born again in Christ, we literally have a different spiritual DNA.
Right.
So it's a fascinating conversation to think about. But the kind of the big point was, we don't become arrogant, we don't become separatists, we don't become judgmental. We seek to save those who are lost, like Christ did. We go to the world. We don't run from it.
Really great for us to think about, especially with everything going on today, with high emotions and what some people would think we are in crisis. As a country, or all kinds of things going on in personal lives and everything else. So thank you for elaborating on that a bit for us. This is Shana Kim and Pastor Jeff Bogue. We hope to see you next week. Thank you for joining us this time, and have a great night. Thank you.